Your villain sucks. Not because you're untalented, because you're building a cartoon when you need a mirror. Let me show you how to create an antagonist who makes readers question everything. I'm Lucas. I write dark fiction and help writers stop embarrassing themselves with cardboard cutouts. Today we will learn how to build villains who feel inevitable, personal, and honestly terrifying. We are stealing moves from Gone Girl, Les Miserables, and whatever it is in the zeitgeist. You get brutal checklists you can use tonight, plus the uncomfortable truth about what makes villains actually work. Here's the brutal truth. If your villain could walk into someone else's story unchanged, you've failed. Most writers think villains exist to be defeated. Wrong. They exist to transform your hero. A weak villain lets your protagonist coast. A strong villain forces them to become someone they never thought they could be. But here's what really separates amateur villains from professional ones. Stakes that matter personally. Your reader doesn't care if generic Dark Lord number 47 wants to destroy the world. They care when the villain threatens something the hero, and by extension the reader, actually values, like family, identity, basically the hero's core beliefs about how the world should work. Think about it. Voldemort isn't terrifying because he's powerful. He is terrifying because he represents everything Harry was saved from becoming. A person who sees others as expendable. The Emperor isn't just politically evil, he's trying to turn Luke into his father, literally and figuratively corrupting his bloodline. The best villains don't just threaten the hero's life, they threaten the hero's reason for living. In the next section, I will give you the mirror test that separates amateur villains from the ones readers obsess over. The best villains are your hero's dark reflection. What they could become if they made different choices or let their wounds fester. This isn't about giving them the same powers. It's about giving them the same core wound with a twisted response. And here's the psychology behind this. We are fascinated by our own potential for darkness. The villain who scares us the most isn't the alien monster. It's the human being who made choices we can almost understand. In Les Miserables, Javert and Valjean both experienced injustice. Valjean learned mercy, while Javert doubled down on rigid law. But both responses make perfect psychological sense. In Gone Girl, Amy and Nick both fear being ordinary. Amy constructs elaborate performances to seem perfect. Nick just hopes his charm will be enough. One's a sociopath, one's just selfish, but they're points on the same spectrum. In Black Panther, T'Challa and Killmonger both lost fathers to violence. T'Challa chose healing and gradual change, while Killmonger chose vengeance and revolution. And the movie forces us to admit Killmonger has valid points. So here's the mirror test. Your villain should be able to give a speech that makes your hero and your reader pause and think, wait, do they have a point? The most unsettling villains share the hero's virtue, but corrupted. Javert's dedication to justice becomes merciless rigidity. Amy's attention to detail becomes obsessive manipulation. The virtue becomes the vice when taken to its extreme. Try this now. List your hero's greatest strength. Now ask, how could that same strength, unchecked by wisdom or compassion, become destructive? Now, that's your villain's core trait. But mirrors without rules are just broken glass. Let's give your villain a philosophy that makes them genuinely dangerous. Readers respect sharks, not piranhas. Sharks have rules. They're apex predators with a system. Piranhas just attack randomly and get forgotten. Your villain needs a code. Not because it makes them good, but because it makes them predictable, which paradoxically makes them terrifying. Here's why codes work psychologically. Humans fear what they can't predict, but they are obsessed with what they can predict but can't control. A villain who kills randomly is scary for about 5 minutes. Now, if there's a villain who kills according to rules you understand but can't stop, now that keeps you awake at night. 4 types that actually work. The ideologue. Because the world is broken, only I can fix it. They have a vision of utopia that requires everyone else to suffer. The purist. Because I am superior, others must serve or die. They genuinely believe in hierarchy and their place at the top. The fatalist. Because nothing matters, I'll prove it. They've concluded life is meaningless and want everyone to see it their way. The wounded. Because I was hurt, the world deserves pain. They're spreading their trauma like a virus. Now here's the advanced move. Give them one line they absolutely won't cross. This isn't a weakness per se, it's what makes them human enough to be terrifying. Shiger follows his coin toss religiously. Cersei will burn cities to protect her children. Vader can't bring himself to kill Luke. That limit makes them more frightening, not less, because it shows they choose their evil. They're not just chaos machines. The constraint creates the character. What they won't do defines them as much as what they will do. It's the difference between a monster and a person who chose to become monstrous. Now let's wire this philosophy in your plot so they don't just sit in their tower monologuing. Here's an amateur mistake. Making your villain reactive. They sit around waiting for the hero to do something, then respond like a video game boss. And here's the professional move. Your villain is proactive. They have their own agenda that moves forward whether the hero exists or not. The hero is disrupting their plan, not the other way around. Here's the escalation psychology. Each confrontation should cost both sides something they can't get back. The hero loses allies, resources, or innocence. The villain loses restraint, allies, or pieces of their humanity. By the final confrontation, both characters are fundamentally changed. The escalation pattern that actually works. Round 1. Villain wins cleanly because the hero doesn't understand the game yet. This isn't just a defeat. It's a revelation about how the world really works. The hero realizes they've been playing by the wrong rules. Round 2. Hero adapts and scores a meaningful victory, but discovers the villain planned for this response. The hero's success actually advances the villain's larger agenda. This is the "you fell right into my trap" moment, but done cleverly. Round 3. Villain escalates beyond what anyone thought possible, including themselves. They cross their own lines because the hero has pushed them to it. This is where the villain's code starts cracking under pressure. Round 4. The final confrontation, where both hero and villain have become someone new. The villain has evolved or devolved beyond their original motivation, while the hero has developed new capabilities or understanding. The Pyrrhic escalation. Each victory should cost the villain something important. Allies who abandoned them, respect they valued, or pieces of their original noble goal. By the climax, they are more dangerous but also more hollow. Now here's a test. If you removed your villain's actions, would your story collapse or just change direction? If it would just change direction, they're not driving enough plot. Your villain should be working toward their goal every scene they're in, even when they're not on the page. What are they doing Tuesday afternoon while your hero is having coffee? They're not waiting for the next chapter. They're plotting in the background. They should be plotting in the background. Now, are you ready for the systematic approach that makes this foolproof? Meet the villain framework. V is for vision. What future are they building? This can't be destroy everything. They need to envision something better in their own twisted view. Write it in their voice. I will create a world where ... Make it seductive enough that some people might actually agree. I is for interlock. How do they connect to your hero beyond just opposing them? Best connections are personal, shared history, family ties, competing for the same goal, or representing the hero's potential dark path. Random encounters feel arbitrary. Destiny feels inevitable. L is for leverage. What unique power do they wield that makes them specifically dangerous to this hero? Don't just make them generically powerful. Tailor their strength to exploit your hero's particular weakness. For example, a hero who values truth faces a master manipulator, or a hero who protects innocence faces someone who targets families. The other L is for limits. What line won't they cross and why? This isn't their weakness, it's their humanity showing through the cracks. It's what makes them a person who chooses evil rather than a force of nature. The limit should connect to their origin wound or core value. A is for actions. 3 escalating moves that build throughout your story. Each should be proactive, advancing their agenda. and reactive, responding to the hero's interference. Plan these like a chess match. Move, counter move, sacrifice, and then finally checkmate attempt. I is for inversion. It's a one moment where they're right and the hero is wrong, or where their point of view makes uncomfortable sense. This isn't about redeeming them, it's about adding complexity. The best villains force heroes and readers to question their assumptions. N is for narrative payoff. How does their defeat or victory prove your story's theme? Their end should feel inevitable given everything that came before. Don't just kill them. Resolve the ideological conflict they represent. Let's do a Gone Girl deep dive. The story's vision is a perfect marriage narrative under Amy's control. The interlock is that both want the same marriage fantasy, different methods though. The leverage is media manipulation and evidence fabrication. The limits, or in this case, limit, is her self-image as the amazing girl. Actions done, disappearance, frame job, and public revelation. The inversion is her diary. It makes us believe her first, and the payoff is marriage as mutual destruction, not partnership. Let's move on to Killmonger analysis. His vision is Wakanda leading global black liberation. His interlock is his rightful claim to T'Challa's throne, their shared royal blood. His leverage, tactical skill plus royal legitimacy and moral high ground. His limits is that he won't abandon the oppressed even when it would be strategic. His actions are museum theft, challenge Wakandan ritual, and revolutionary war. The inversion is his anger about Wakanda's isolationism is completely valid. And finally, the payoff is that his actions force Wakanda to engage with the world. Now let's build your villain right now. I want you to pause the video, grab something to write with. We're building your villain live. Minutes 0 to 2 is the vision. Write their manifesto in 2 to 3 sentences. The world would be better if ... Don't make it obviously evil. Make it seductive. Thanos genuinely believed cutting the population in half would end suffering. Amy Dune believed controlling narratives would create perfect relationships. Your villain's vision should make sense to them, even if we disagree. Minutes 2 to 4, which is the interlock. How are they connected to your hero? If your first answer is they're not, that's your problem. Create a connection. You can do a shared mentor who taught them differently, a family member who chose the dark path, or something else entirely. Just give them a connection. That's the important thing here. Minutes 4 to 6 are the leverage and limits. What's their superpower? Don't just make them really strong. Make them specifically dangerous to your hero. One example is, say, a hero who values honesty faces a master liar, or a hero who protects faces someone who weaponizes protection. Then, what's their kryptonite? Not a weakness, but a principle they won't violate. This should connect to their origin wound. Minutes 6 to 8, we have the 3 moves in this part. I want you to plan their escalation arc. Move 1, the warning shot that establishes their competence. Move 2, personal attack that raises the stakes. And move 3, nuclear option that forces the hero to evolve. Each move should advance their agenda and respond to the hero's interference. They're not waiting around. They're playing chess while the hero learns the rules. Minutes 8 to 10 is the uncomfortable moment. When do they make a point that stings? When are they more right than the hero wants to admit? This isn't about redemption, it's about complexity. Killmonger's anger about Wakanda's isolationism was completely valid. Amy's criticism of Nick's emotional laziness was spot on. In short, your villain should voice an uncomfortable truth. If you can do this exercise, your villain isn't ready. That's not an insult, it's information. Better to discover it now than after you've written 200 pages around a cardboard cutout. Now let's talk about which archetype fits your villain best. First up is the ideologue. This is a villain that believes their cause justifies anything. Perfect for thematic stories where you want to debate big ideas. They're the hardest to defeat because you have to prove their philosophy wrong, not just overpower them. Examples are Magneto, Ozymandias, and Killmonger. Pro tip: Give them one policy that actually makes sense. Magneto's fear of human persecution isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. That's what makes him compelling. Next up is the anti-villain. Noble goals, terrible methods. They make readers question whether the hero is really right. These are the villains who convert the hero's allies and split your fanbase down in the middle. Examples are Javert, Mr. Freeze, and Handsome Jack from Borderlands. Pro tip: they should represent what the hero could become if they cared too much about their goal and not enough about their methods. Now we have the force of nature. A villain that is pure threat. No negotiation possible. They test human limits and reveal character through how people respond to an unstoppable force. Not human or barely human, but follows consistent rules. Examples are the shark in Jaws, the T-800, and any cosmic horror entities. Here's a pro tip. Give them an internal logic or behavior pattern. Even mindless threats should be predictable once you understand their nature. The mastermind. A villain that's always 3 steps ahead and treats conflict like a chess match. They're not just smart, they're psychologically insightful. They understand people better than people understand themselves. Examples are Moriarty, Littlefinger, and Hannibal Lecter. Pro tip: show their intelligence through social manipulation, not just clever plans. Anyone can plot, only true masterminds can predict exactly how someone will react to pressure. The Wounded King. They had legitimate grievances that festered into something monstrous. They represent what happens when justice is denied for too long. They are the most tragic villains because they were created by the system they now oppose. Examples are Scar, Loki, and most revolutionary villains. Pro tip: their original wound should be something the reader can sympathize with completely. The monster they became should be a recognizable response to that specific wound. Wrong, but understandable. You can mix and match these. The best villains borrow elements from multiple archetypes. For example, let's have Vader. He is part ideologue. You can see this in the Empire's Order. He's also part Wounded King. The poor guy lost Padme. And he's also part force of nature because he has unstoppable force powers. But knowing the archetype is just the beginning. Let's talk about the psychological truth that most writing advice is afraid to address. Here's what most writing advice won't tell you because it makes people uncomfortable. The best villains make you question whether they're actually wrong. They're not evil for evil's sake. They looked at the same broken world as your hero and chose a different solution. Sometimes their solution even sounds reasonable at first. Here's the psychological reality. We are not afraid of pure evil. We're afraid of corrupted good. We're afraid of the person who started with noble intentions and convinced themselves that atrocities were justified. Because deep down, we know we could make the same rationalizations. This is why Disney villains don't hunt us as adults, but characters like Walter White do. Jafar wants power because he's just evil. Walter White wants to provide for his family. And that reasonable goal slowly corrupts everything he touches. The scarier villain is the one whose first step made perfect sense. Here's some advanced psychology for this. The most disturbing villains represent our own potential for self-deception. They show us how good people convince themselves to do terrible things, how protection becomes control, how justice becomes revenge, and how mercy becomes enabling. Amy Dune didn't start crazy. She started as someone who wanted her marriage to be perfect and gradually decided that everyone else was just too stupid to understand what perfect looked like. Killmonger didn't start as a terrorist. He started as a kid who watched his father die for trying to help oppressed people and decided that asking nicely hadn't worked. Here's the test. If you can't explain your villain's logic to a friend and have them say, "I don't agree, but I understand how someone could think that," your villain isn't deep enough. The uncomfortable corollary is your hero has to prove there's a better way. Not just win through superior firepower, but demonstrate that their approach actually works. T'Challa doesn't just defeat Killmonger, he adopts modified versions of Killmonger's goals and proves Wakanda can help the world without conquering it. This is why pure evil villains are easier to write but less memorable. There's no moral complexity to resolve, just a bad guy to punch. But complex villains force your hero to grow philosophically, not just physically. But there are still 3 ways to destroy even the most psychologically complex villain concept. 3 ways to destroy your villain, even the good ones. First up is motivational whiplash. Changing their core drive mid-story because you need them to do something for plot convenience. If you establish that your villain protects family above all else, don't suddenly make them sacrifice family for power without a massive internal crisis to justify it. Pick a motivation that can carry your entire story. Stick with it, evolve it, don't abandon it. Next up is competence decay. Basically making your villain suddenly stupid in the final act so that the hero can win. This is the most insulting thing you can do to your readers. If your villain was smart enough to threaten the hero for 200 pages, they stay smart until the end. If they lose, it should be because the hero finally grew enough to match them, not because the villain forgot how to think. Last one is the redemption cop-out. Basically trying to redeem every villain because you're afraid of moral complexity. Sometimes people choose to be the bad guy, even when they understand the consequences. Let them. Not every villain needs a last-minute change of heart. Sometimes the most honest ending is they knew better and they chose worse anyway. Bonus failure mode. We have the speechifier. These are villains who explain their entire plan in a monologue before the final fight. Real people don't do this. Smart villains especially don't do this. Show their philosophy through their actions, not through exposition dumps. Drop your villain's vision statement in the comments. They're because blank I must blank manifesto. I'll tell you if it's compelling or cartoonish. No sugarcoating. Well, maybe a little sugarcoating because I want to be nice sometimes. Here's the final takeaway. Mediocre heroes are forgettable, but mediocre villains, they don't just bore readers, they kill the entire story. Your villain is carrying half the emotional weight of your narrative. Make sure they're strong enough to bear it. Alright, I'll see you in the next one.